The rain hammered the church roof like God's own judgment. But inside, the silence was a blade twisting in my gut. My mother's eyes locked on mine across the pews, cold as the Kansas winter she'd always blamed for her hardened heart. And in that stare, I saw the words she never said, "You're no son of mine." Then the lawyer cleared his throat, unfolding the will that would shatter us all, his voice steady as he read, "To Alexander Hayes, my beloved son, I leave the heart of this farm, the old homestead, because you are the only one who ever truly saw me." I was 12 the first time I felt the weight of her disappointment, not for some scraped knee or forgotten chore, but for the way my eyes lingered too long on the quarterback during Friday night lights in our dusty little town of Eldridge, Kansas. Eldridge wasn't the kind of place that forgave differences. It was cornfields and church suppers, where men shook hands firm and women whispered prayers for wayward souls. My name's Alex Hayes, and back then, I was just a kid with freckles and a secret that burned hotter than the summer sun. Dad, Tom Hayes, noticed, of course. He was a quiet man, broad-shouldered from years tilling the soil on our family farm, the one his grandfather had claimed from the prairie in 1892. He'd ruffle my hair and say, "Son, the world's big enough for all kinds of storms." His voice gravelly from pipe smoke and unspoken regrets. Mom, Evelyn, heard different echoes. She came from Baptist stock, the kind that quoted Leviticus like it was the evening news, and when I turned 16 and stammered out my truth over pot roast one Sunday, her fork clattered against the plate like a gunshot. "You're confused, Alex," she'd said, her lips thinning into that line I knew too well. "This isn't us. This isn't Christian." Dad had just sat there, chewing slow, his eyes on the window where thunderheads gathered like uninvited guests. He didn't argue, didn't defend. But later, in the barn, he'd handed me a worn copy of The Old Man and the Sea, Hemingway's words about endurance dog-eared and underlined. "Hold on to your pride, boy," he'd murmured. "Some folks take longer to weather the gale." That was Dad. Phrases like poetry from a man who barely finished high school, pieced together from the radio westerns he loved. Mom never touched me the same after that. Hugs turned to pats on the shoulder, and birthday cards came in signed. By 18, I was gone, hitchhiking to Lawrence for college, chasing a journalism degree and the anonymity of a bigger city. Eldridge faded in the rearview, but the ache didn't. Fast forward 15 years, and here I was, 33, back in that same rain-lashed church for Dad's funeral. I'd built a life in Chicago, freelance writer for indie mags, a cozy walk-up in Wicker Park, and Ben, my anchor in the storm. Ben Riley, with his Irish lilt and laugh that could crack open a bad day like a walnut. We met at a Pride rally 3 years back, him waving a flag for trans rights while I snapped photos for a story on queer Midwest migration. He was a social worker, all empathy and sharp wit, with hazel eyes that saw through my bluster. "You're running from something, Hayes," he'd said on our first date over deep dish pizza, his knee brushing mine under the table. "But hell if I ain't the type to chase." We'd moved in together last spring, painted the walls sage green, hung photos of us grinning at Lake Michigan sunsets. Ben made me believe in roots again, the kind that didn't choke. But Eldridge pulled me back like a hook in the gut. Dad's cancer had come swift, pancreatic, stage 4 by diagnosis, and he'd refused the chemo, saying, "Let the land take me, Alex. It's kinder." His calls grew sparse, voice fading like an old cassette, but he'd end each with, "Proud of you, son. Always." Mom hadn't called once. When the hospice nurse rang me 3 weeks ago, it was to say he was gone, and the funeral was set. Ben wanted to come, but I waved him off. "Family business," I lied, kissing his forehead. Truth was, I couldn't bear the thought of her venom spilling onto him. So I drove solo, the 8 hours blurring into a haze of bad coffee and Springsteen on repeat. The service was a blur of hymns and condolences from folks who'd aged like the town itself. Neighbors with lined faces and kids who'd grown into strangers. Mom sat ramrod straight in the front row, her silver-streaked hair pinned back, black dress buttoned to the throat. She hadn't looked at me until the end, when the pastor droned about eternal rest. That's when her gaze hit, accusatory, as if Dad's death was my fault for dragging him into my lifestyle. As she'd once spat during our last blowout. I wanted to scream that I'd loved him fiercely, visited every chance, held his hand while machines beeped like accusatory clocks. But I just nodded, throat tight, and followed the procession to the graveside. That's where the lawyer, Mr. Harlan from the feed store firm, pulled me aside under a dripping oak. Your father had specific instructions, Alex. The reading's private, family only. Tonight at the house. Mom overheard, her chin lifting like a challenge. Fine, she clipped. But don't think this changes anything. Ben texted then, miss you. Call if it gets ugly. I pocketed the phone, the rain soaking my suit, and wondered if ugly was all I had left of home. The farmhouse loomed like a sentinel that evening, porch light flickering against the downpour. I'd grown up in those creaky rooms, wood floors scarred from Dad's boots, kitchen smelling of apple pie and motor oil. Mom had kept it pristine, a museum to the life she wanted. I knocked, water pooling at my feet, and she opened the door without a word, gesturing me to the parlor where Dad's recliner sat empty, a ghost in plaid. Mr. Harlan arrived minutes later, briefcase in hand, his wire rims fogged from the wet. We settled, me on the floral sofa, her in Dad's chair, and he began. The will was straightforward at first. The tractor to Cousin Ray, the savings split even. Then he paused, adjusting his glasses. To Evelyn Hayes, I leave our joint accounts and the East 40 acres, with love for the woman who held our home together through every drought. Her fingers whitened on the armrest, but she nodded, chin high. And then, to Alexander Hayes, my beloved son, I leave the heart of this farm, the old homestead, the barn, and the west pasture, because you are the only one who ever truly saw me, loved me without condition, and carried our family's quiet truths forward. This is not rejection, Evelyn. It's recognition. Alex, build on it. Live loud. The room spun. The homestead, the heart as Dad called it, wasn't just land. It was the original plot, the one with the creek where we'd fished, the barn where he'd taught me to mend fences. Worth a small fortune in Eldridge's booming AG market. Mom's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a landed trout. Tom wouldn't, she whispered. He knew. He knew what Alex is. Mr. Harlan cleared his throat. He knew everything, Mrs. Hayes, and he wrote this himself, notarized last month. No contest. I stared at the paper, ink blurring through tears I hadn't shed since Dad's last breath over the phone. Why? I managed, voice cracking. Harlan sighed. He said you'd understand. Something about storms and pride. Mom surged up then, chair scraping like nails on chalkboard. This is spite. From beyond the grave. Because of him. She jabbed a finger at me, eyes wild. You poisoned him, Alex. Your sin, your choices. Enough. The word exploded from me, raw and unfamiliar. I'd practiced restraint for years, biting back barbs in holiday cards, swallowing the urge to fight. But this, Dad's final act of love, a will that roared what his silence never could, ignited something fierce. He loved me, Mom, all of me, and he pitied you for not being able to. She recoiled as if slapped, and Harlan gathered his papers, murmuring condolences before fleeing into the night. We stood there, the clock ticking like a heartbeat, rain lashing the windows. Get out, she finally said, voice brittle as autumn leaves. Take your inheritance and your perversion. This farm dies with me. I grabbed my jacket, the weight of the document burning in my pocket, and stepped into the storm. Driving back to the motel, Springsteen's Thunder Road blared. Lyrics about highways and hitching rides hitting too close. I called Ben, his voice a lifeline. Come home, love. We'll figure the land later. You're enough. But Eldridge wasn't done with me. The next morning, Cousin Ray cornered me at the diner, coffee black as his mood. Your ma's talking contest, Alex. Says Tom's mind was gone, doped on pain meds. Betrayal stung fresh. Ray, who'd fished with us, now siding with her grudge? Dad was clear as day. I protested. You gonna let her erase him? He shrugged, mustache twitching. Family's family. Blood don't bend easy here. By noon, the town buzz hummed. Hayes boy back, stirring ghosts. Old Mr. Wilkins from the co-op clapped my shoulder. Heard about the will. Tom's way of saying what mattered. while the pastor's wife averted her eyes. Ben flew in that afternoon, renting a truck at the airport, his duffel slung over one shoulder like he was storming a castle. "No more solo missions, cowboy," he grinned, pulling me into a hug that smelled of airport pretzels and home. We holed up in the motel, him tracing maps of the farm on napkins, dreaming aloud about turning the barn into a community space. Queer artists' retreat, maybe, or a farm-to-table spot celebrating Midwest roots. "Your dad's gift, Alex. Not a chain, a key." His optimism chipped at my walls, but doubt lingered. Mom's lawyer had filed papers by evening, claiming undue influence. Undo me. The hearing was set for Topeka in 2 weeks, giving me time to dig. I pored over Dad's things in the attic she grudgingly let me access. Boxes of letters from his war days in Vietnam, yellowed photos of him young and grinning with buddies who'd never come home. One envelope, sealed with wax, bore my name. Inside, pages of his scrawl, a letter dated the week before he died. "Son, if you're reading this, the end's near. I never said it loud enough. I'm sorry. Watched you grow strong in a world that clips wings. Your mom. She lost her brother young to that life, as she calls it. AIDS in '83. It broke her. But that's her storm, not yours. The farm's yours because you remind me of the boy I was, free, before duty dulled me. Love Ben for me. Tell him Tom's grateful for the light he brings you. Be the gale, Alex. Love, Dad." Tears soaked the pages, but clarity cut through. Mom's rejection wasn't just faith. It was grief, fossilized into hate. Ben read it over my shoulder, his hand steady on my back. "We'll show her, love. Not with anger, with truth." We drove to the farm unannounced, finding her in the kitchen, kneading dough with furious rhythm. "Evelyn," Ben said softly, his accent wrapping the word like silk. "I'm Ben. Tom's mentioned you in his letters. Said you make the best pie west of the Mississippi." She froze, eyes flicking to him, then me, suspicion warring with curiosity. We sat, the letter between us like a truce flag. I read it aloud, voice steady, Ben's presence a quiet strength. When I finished, silence stretched, broken only by the oven timer. Mom's hands trembled as she poured coffee, black and steaming. "His brother," she whispered finally. "Danny. He was, like you. Came home from San Francisco, skin and bones, eyes hollow. Begged me to pray it away. I did. But God took him anyway." Her voice cracked, the first fracture in her armor. Ben leaned in. "Grief's a thief, Evelyn. Steals words, twists love. But Tom's will, that's him giving them back." She didn't soften that night. No hugs, no apologies. But she let us stay for pie, the crust flaky, apples tart with cinnamon. As we left, she touched my arm, brief, electric. "The hearing. I'll withdraw." It wasn't absolution, but it was air after drowning. Weeks blurred into preparation, not for court but for reclaiming. Ben and I surveyed the land, the west pasture gold under autumn sun, creek murmuring secrets. We planted bulbs, tulips for spring, a riot of color against the monochrome fields. Town whispers shifted. Folks dropped by with tools, stories of Dad's quiet generosities. Ray showed up one dawn, shovel in hand. "Oh, the old man. Let's build that barn right." The climax hit on All Souls' Day, frost nipping the air as we gathered for the dedication. A simple plaque on the homestead door, "For Tom Hayes, who weathered storms with grace." Mom arrived last, coat clutched tight, her eyes scanning the crowd. Neighbors, a few queer kids from Lawrence who'd driven down, Ben and me at the center. Pastor Wilkins led a prayer, non-denominational, words about legacy and light. Then she stepped forward, voice quavering but clear. "Tom was stubborn as Kansas clay, loved fierce, forgave slow. Alex, my son." The words hung, fragile as spider silk. "I called you lost once, but you found him when I couldn't. This farm's yours. We're family." I pulled her into an embrace then, her frame bird bone under my arms, and for the first time, she didn't stiffen. Ben's eyes met mine over her shoulder, shining with that unbreakable hope. No betrayal mended overnight, no wounds sealed without scars. But in that moment, under the wide prairie sky, Dad's will spoke volumes. Not just of land, but of love's quiet thunder. As winter crept in, Ben and I settled into the homestead, the barn echoing with hammers and laughter. Mom visited Sundays, tentative at first, then with recipes scribbled on index cards. She'd never say gay without a hitch, but she'd ask about Ben's caseload, share stories of Danny with a softening gaze. Eldridge didn't transform. Prejudice lingered like old paint, but pockets of acceptance bloomed, fed by our little haven. One evening, snow blanketing the fields, Ben and I sat on the porch, mugs steaming. "You think Dad knew?" I asked, head on his shoulder. "About us ending up here?" Ben chuckled, kissing my temple. "Knew? Love, he planned it. Storms don't scare him, or us." And in the hush, with stars wheeling overhead, I felt it. Not just acceptance, but belonging. The gale had passed, leaving roots deeper than regret. Life on the homestead unfolded like one of Dad's old westerns. Slow builds to sudden showdowns, dust settling into unexpected alliances. Ben threw himself into the renovations with the fervor of a man rewriting his own origin story. "This barn's got bones, Alex," he'd say. Blueprints spread across the scarred oak table we'd salvaged from the attic. "We're gonna make it sing." He envisioned artist residencies, queer writers and musicians holing up for weeks, drawing from the land's raw pulse. I handled the words, grant proposals to arts councils in Topeka, pitches to Chicago outlets about reclaiming rural queer space. It felt audacious, this dream of turning Eldridge's fringes into a beacon. But every nail hammered felt like defiance. Every beam raised a verse in Dad's unspoken poem. Mom's visits became ritual. She'd arrive at dawn, basket in arm, fresh eggs from the co-op hens, jars of her chokecherry jam that puckered the mouth like first kisses. We'd brew coffee strong as tar, sit at the kitchen island while Ben sketched elevations on napkins. At first, her contributions were practical. "That loft'll leak come spring thaw, your father patched it thrice." But gradually, stories seeped out, tributaries to the river of her guarded heart. Danny's laugh, like wind chimes in a gale. The way he'd send postcards from the Castro, vibrant with possibility, until the stamps stopped coming. "I prayed for a miracle," she'd confess one gray afternoon, hands twisting a dish rag. "But miracles ain't always what you ask for. Sometimes they're the ones that break you open." I listened, the sun she'd half erased, feeling the thaw inch by inch. Ben was the bridge, his easy questions disarming her defenses. "Tell us about Tom's war stories, Evelyn." The ones he'd whisper to Alex by the creek. She'd light up then, recounting how Dad dodged bullets in the Mekong Delta not with bravado, but by trading cigarettes for silence from the locals. "He came home quieter," she'd say, "carried ghosts like extra baggage." It humanized him further, that giant of my childhood, revealing cracks where light and love had slipped through. But harmony's fragile as prairie grass in drought. The betrayal I'd sensed from Ray festered into something sharper when the town's annual harvest fair rolled around. Eldridge swelled with outsiders, booths hawking funnel cakes and handmade quilts, Ferris wheel creaking against the October sky. Ben and I set up a table for the Homestead Project, flyers touting Hayes Haven, a space for stories unsilenced, with photos of the barn's progress and a donation jar etched with rainbows. Folks milled polite, some nodding approval. Tom'd be tickled. Others drifting away with narrowed eyes. Ray sauntered up mid-afternoon, overalls dusted with chaff, a beer in his fist. "Fancy setup, cousin," he drawled, eyeing the pamphlets like they were contraband. "Turnin' the old place into some pansy paradise?" The word landed like a slap, drawing stares from the quilting circle nearby. Ben stiffened beside me, but I stepped forward, pulse thundering. "It's a haven, Ray, for everyone who's ever felt the town's boot on their neck, including the ones you pretend don't exist." He laughed, too loud, spilling foam. "Your ma told me 'bout the will. Tom's meds musta fried his brain. Leavin' prime land to this." He gestured vaguely at us, the table, the very air. Mom materialized then, materializing from the crowd like a specter, her face ashen under the harvest moon. "Raymond," she snapped, voice cutting sharper than sickles. You forget yourself. He blinked, beer forgotten. Aunt Evie, Tom chose clear, and I stand by it. Now apologize or leave. The fair hushed around us, a bubble of tension. Ray muttered something garbled, slunk off toward the beer tent. Mom turned to us, her hand hovering near mine before dropping. He don't speak for us, she said quietly. Not anymore. That night, back at the farm, we uncorked a bottle of Dad's homemade dandelion wine. Tart and golden, like captured sunlight. Ben raised a toast. To gales and the women who weather them. Mom clinked her glass, a ghost of a smile. But as she drove off into the dark, I caught the tremor in her shoulders. Acceptance wasn't linear. It was a prairie trail, full of switchbacks and hidden sinkholes. Winter clamped down hard that year, blizzards burying the fence lines in drifts taller than a man. Work stalled, the barn a skeletal promise under tarps. Ben and I hunkered in, fires crackling in the hearth we'd restored from fieldstone. Nights blurred into intimacy. Not the fevered kind, but the deep weave of shared silences. His head on my chest as we read aloud from Dad's Hemingway collection. The old man dreamed of lions, Ben murmured one evening, snow tapping the panes like impatient fingers. What do you dream of, Alex? I traced the freckles across his nose. Lions? Nah, just this you, the land, a mother mending. But dreams fracture. A letter arrived in January, forwarded from Chicago. An offer from a Wichita developer, fat with zeros, for the West pasture. Prime for solar farm, it read. Respectful of legacy. Tempting. In the quiet hours when grants dried up and doubts whispered. Ben saw the envelope on the counter, his face falling. You thinkin' of sellin'? I shook my head, but the seed lodged. Just security. For us. He pulled me close. This ain't about money, love. It's Tom's heart. Yours. The real storm brewed from within. Mom called one sleet-lashed night, voice hushed. Alex, Ray's been talkin'. To the paper. Says the will was coerced, that you influenced Tom with your ways. Betrayal again. Sharper now, laced with her complicity. And you? I demanded, phone slick in my grip. Silence stretched. Then, I shut him down. But the town's listenin'. Meet me tomorrow. At the creek. Dawn broke brittle, ice glazing the path to where Dad and I had cast lines as kids. She waited on the footbridge, bundled in wool, thermos steaming. I told Ray to stop, she began, no preamble. But he ain't wrong about the whispers. Folks fear change. Fear you, what you represent. Her eyes so like mine brimmed. I know that fear. Felt it when Danny called, voice bright with San Francisco lights. Thought I could pray it out, save him. Lost him instead. She handed me the thermos, cocoa, spiked with whiskey. Tom saw you clear. Me? I'm learnin' late. We walked then, boots crunching, sharing fragments. My Chicago years, the bar where Ben proposed with a ring from a gumball machine. Her regrets, the letters to Danny she'd burned in shame. By the time we looped back, the sun pierced clouds, gilding the snow. Keep the land, she said. Build your haven. I'll testify if need be. It was the closest to I love you she'd come since I was small. Ray's poison spread, though. A petition circulated, veiled as preserving agricultural heritage. The local rag ran a piece. Hayes' heirs' plans sparked divide. Ben fielded calls from funders pulling back, his optimism fraying at the edges. They're scared of us shining too bright, he'd say, but exhaustion shadowed his eyes. One night, after a donor bailed, he snapped, rare fire in his voice. Maybe we bolt, Alex. Back to the city. This fight's too heavy. I reeled, the room tilting. Dad's will, our life here. Is it worth losing us? He shot back, door slamming behind him into the storm. He returned at midnight, frost-kissed and contrite, collapsing into my arms. Sorry, love. The weight, it bends me. We mended in whispers, promises renewed. But the rift lingered, a hairline crack. Climax crested in February. A town hall crammed with farmers and flannel. The air thick with pipe smoke and suspicion. Ray stood, petition in hand, voice booming. This ain't about hate. It's heritage. That land's for corn, not whatever Alex plans. Murmurs swelled, nods from the old guard. Mom rose then, slow as rising dough, her presence commanding the room. Heritage? She echoed, steel in her spine. Tom's heritage was love, fierce, unflinching. He left it to my son because Alex is our legacy. Gay or not, he's Hayes blood. And I'll be damned if I let kin spit on that. Gasps rippled. Ray's face purpled. I stood beside her, Ben's hand in mine, a united front. The vote swung, not unanimous, but enough. Whispers turned to handshakes, tentative bridges over chasms. Spring unfurled green and forgiving, the barn alive with crews. Local hands, queer volunteers from afar. Mom brought lunch. Sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, her way of saying welcome. Ben and I watched from the rise, his arm around me. Your dad's volumes, he murmured, echoing loud. The first residents arrived in May, a flutter of energy against the homestead's steady hum. Lila, a trans poet from Omaha with ink-stained fingers and a laugh like bells. Marcus, a sculptor fleeing Brooklyn's grind, his tools clattering like old friends. They claimed the loft spaces Ben had rigged with skylights, canvas walls whispering in the breeze off the creek. Mornings filled with coffee steam and critique circles. Lila's verses on dysphoria blooming raw under the rafters. Marcus chiseling forms from barnwood that evoked tangled roots and release. I moderated, notebook in lap, but mostly I listened, their stories weaving into mine like prairie grasses and wind. Mom observed from afar at first, perched on the porch swing with a lap quilt, pretending to mend socks. Don't let 'em burn the place down, she'd gruff, but her eyes lingered on Lila's easy grace, the way Marcus bantered with Ray's boy, who tagged along wide-eyed. One evening, as fireflies sparked the dusk, she joined us around the pit, skewers of marshmallows charring golden. Wrote a thing once, she admitted, voice low, after Danny. Burned it, but the words stuck. Lila leaned in. Sharing, Evelyn. Words don't burn true. Hesitant, Mom recited. A fragment about a brother lost to city lights, regret like frost on window panes. We sat hushed, then clapped, the sound a bomb. Ben squeezed my knee under the blanket. See? Volumes multiplying. The piece is prairie vast, but pocked with hidden thorns. The betrayal I'd buried in Ray resurfaced slicker, slithering through anonymous letters shoved under the door. Sodom spawn on sacred soil. Sell or repent. Crude cartoons clipped from rags, my face caricatured with horns. Ben burned them in the sink, flames dancing shadows on his jaw. Hate's loud 'cause it's scared, he said. But sleep evaded me, dreams tangled with Mom's old slurs and Dad's fading voice. The gut punch came mid-June, heat wave shimmering the fields like mirage. Package arrived, no return address, brown paper crisp. Inside, Dad's pocket watch, the one he'd worn since Nam, chain snapped, face cracked. Tucked in the case, a note in Ray's block print. Found this in the attic. Tom's warning. Time's up for your freak show. Rage boiled, hot as asphalt. I stormed his place, gravel spitting under tires, Ben's protests fading in the dust. Ray met me on the stoop, shotgun casual in crook of arm. Not aimed, but present. Knew you'd come, city boy, he sneered. That watch? Tom's shame, not gift. We squared off, words flying like haymakers. You stole it, I accused. Twisted his memory for your petty grudge. He laughed, bitter. Grudge? Your pa chose you over blood. Over me who worked this dirt beside him. And for what? To fund your parade. The gun lifted an inch. My heart hammered. Then Ben's truck roared up, headlights slicing the twilight. He vaulted out, stance wide. Easy, Ray. This ends tonight or cops do. Standoff stretched, cicadas screaming chorus. Ray's eyes flicked, defiance cracking to something hollow. Take the damn watch. But Eldridge remembers. Back home, Ben rapped my knuckles, more bruised from clenching than blows, while I cradled the timepiece, gears silent as Dad's last breath. Mom called it dawn, voice-edged, Heard from the sheriff, Ray's confessin' to the letters. Says he was protectin' family. She paused. Heavy. I raised that fool. My fault. No, I countered. His poison. But we drain it together. She came over, mending the chain with pliers from Dad's kit, her hands steady. Time don't stop for hate, she murmured, clicking the face shut. It ticks on. Residency swelled. Word spread via Lila's zine. Marcus's Instagram lives. A violinist named Theo joined, lanky and soulful, his bows coaxing laments from strings that echoed the creek's murmur. Nights, we'd gather on the rise, blankets pooled, stars pricking the dome. Ben and I stole moments in the hayloft, his whispers tracing constellations on my skin. Romance not in grand gestures, but in the quiet certainty of his breath sinking mine. You're my volume, Alex, he'd say, fingers laced. Loudest page. Yet conflict simmered broader. The county board caught wind, zoning hearings looming like thunderheads. Incompatible use, the chairwoman intoned at the first session. Glasses perched like judgment. Developers circled. That solar bid resurfacing with incentives, tax breaks, community benefits. Temptation gnawed anew, especially when a storm ripped shingles from the barn. Repair bills stacking like cordwood. Ben and I argued low by lamplight. Sell the pasture, he urged one sodden night. Keep the heart. Dad's heart was the whole. I shot back. Can't carve it piecemeal. Doors slammed. Silences stretched. Mom mediated. Unbidden, with pie and plain talk. Lands like love. Give it away in bits, lose the soul. The hearing climaxed in August, courthouse sweltering. Fans whirring futile. Ray slouched in back, face gaunt, but Mom testified first, voice unwavering. Hayes Haven honors Tom. Feeds bodies, mends spirits. Deny it, deny his will. Residents followed. Lila on art as lifeline. Marcus on roots reclaimed. Even Ray rose, halting. I erred. Wronged kin. Support it now. Gasps. The board deliberated behind closed doors, emerging with conditional approval. Buffers, noise limits. Victory tasted of sweat and relief. Fall painted the fields amber, harvest moon swelling fat. We hosted the first open house. Fiddles and fiddles. Tables groaning under potluck bounty. Mom danced a turn with Theo, her laughter rusty but real. Ben pulled me aside, under the oak where Dad's ashes mingled with soil. Marry me proper, Alex? Here, with this mad family we've built. Ring simple, silver, engraved with gale. Slipped on my finger as fireworks cracked overhead, bursts of color against the night. But romance's bloom hides thorns. Whispers persisted. A neighbor's slashed tires, graffiti on the mailbox. Go back to the city. Ben's job in Chicago tugged. Offers piling for remote work that meant distance. Visit weekends, he proposed, but the word chafed. Mom noticed over coffee one crisp morning. Haven's your storm now. Don't let it capsize love. Her words lingered. A compass. Climax crested unexpectedly. In November's chill bite. A fire, arson, the marshal ruled. Gutted the east loft, smoke curling like accusations. We fought it with neighbors' hoses. Lungs burning. Ben dragging singed canvases to safety. Ray arrived late, face streaked, hauling an extinguisher. Heard the bells, he panted. Inside, Lila's poems charred but salvaged. Marcus's sculptures scarred survivors. As dawn broke gray, we sifted ashes. Mom distributing blankets. Rebuild, she declared. Stronger. The culprit? A drifter, Ray confessed later. Someone he'd unwittingly stirred with his old rants. Guilt carved him hollow. He pitched in daily, hands blistered on hammers. Betrayal transmuted to amends, slow as sap rising. Winter whispered in, but warmth held. Ben deferred the city job, committing full. We planned a vow renewal for spring, under that oak. Family, residents, townies invited. Mom sewed my shirt, stitches precise. For the son I almost lost, she said, needle pausing. Twice. Rebuilding the loft became communion. Sweat and sawdust binding us tighter than vows. Theo composed a dirge for the flames, violin weeping through the rafters as we raised new beams, cedar-scented and unyielding. Lila etched phoenix motifs on the walls, ink bold against whitewash. Marcus forged iron gates from the wreckage, twisted but triumphant. Ben orchestrated it all, his social workers spotting fractures before they spread, pairing Ray with Theo for sanding shifts, where grudges melted into guitar riffs and tall tales. Music's the real healer, Theo quipped, plucking a melody that had Ray humming along, off-key but earnest. Mom immersed deepest, surprising us with blueprints of her own. A garden plot by the creek, heirloom seeds from Danny's era, sunflowers tall as memories, lavender for calm. Tom hated weeds, she'd say, trowel flashing, but her smiles came freer, lines softening around her eyes. We'd lunch there, picnics of her deviled eggs and Ben's experimental salads. Kale from the co-op, vinaigrette sharp as truth. Conversations meandered. My freelance piece on rural queer resilience, picked up by The Atlantic. Ben's grant for mental health workshops at the Haven. Mom listened, nodding. Proud, she'd murmur once, the word a gift unwrapped slow, yet undercurrents pulled. Chicago's siren call grew insistent. Ben's mentor emailing about a clinic directorship, salary doubling hours. It's stable, he argued one starlit night, porch swing creaking. For the wedding, kids maybe, adoption's easier there. The word kids landed soft, a dream we'd sketched in whispers, but Eldridge's soil clung. This is home, I countered, heart twisting. Dad's volumes are volumes, can't shelve them. He sighed, head on my shoulder. Love, volumes stack heavy. We balance or topple. Ray's redemption arc hit snags too. A bar brawl in town. Fists over defendin' the farm from faggots. Slurs he'd once echoed. Sheriff hauled him in, mugshot in the rag. He showed at dawn, black eye blooming, apology scrawled on feed sack. Slipped back, he admitted, voice gravel. Hate's sticky. Ben mediated, drawing parallels to his caseload, relapse not failure but call to climb. Ray stayed on, labor penance, but trust rebuilt brick by brick. The wedding planning injected joy, a counterpoint to winter's gray. We chose spring equinox, symbolism thick, balance, renewal. Invites went wide. Lila designing letterpress with wildflower motifs, Marcus crafting rings from barn silver. Mom fretted the menu. No kale, Ben, folks want pie. But her eyes sparkled plotting the cake. 3 tiers of lemon curd and buttercream. Town buzzed ambivalent. Pastor Wilkins offered blessings, but pews half empty for the alternative right. Let 'em, Mom snorted. Our sky's wide enough. Climax brewed in March, thaw mud sucking at boots. A letter from Harlan. The developers, rebuffed before, sued for adverse possession, claiming neglect voided Dad's bequest. Court date loomed, Topeka again, shadows of that first hearing. Ray rallied kin, cousins who'd shunned me, now testifying to the farm's vitality. Tom's vision lives. One aunt averred, her drawl firm. Mom's deposition sealed it. Hours of tape, her voice recounting Dad's final lucid days, will affirmed in triplicate. No coercion, she declared. Only love. Ben and I drove to the hearing, hands clasped over gearshift, his thumb tracing my knuckles. Whatever the judge, he said. We've won already. The courtroom hummed tense, developers' suits crisp against our flannel. Ray sat front, uncalled but present, nod to me solemn. Verdict dropped swift. Bequest upheld, suit dismissed with costs. Outside, rain pattered tentative, crocuses pushing through. Mom waited on the steps, umbrella furled. Knew it, she said, hugging us fierce. First unreserved embrace. My boys. Spring erupted, dogwoods blushing pink along the creek. Wedding day dawned luminous, sky vast as promise. Guests trickled in, residents in finery, neighbors with casseroles, even Ray in starched shirt, tie askew. The oak presided, boughs laced with lanterns, aisle of petals from Mom's garden. Ben walked first, Theo's violin soaring Ashokan farewell, notes curling like smoke. I followed, Mom on arm, her grip steady. You look like Tom, she whispered. Strong. Vows we wrote raw mine, of gales weathered together, bends of light in every storm, rings exchanged, kiss ceiling soft, profound, cheers erupting wild, receptions spilled into the barn, fiddles contradancing feet, pie devoured by starlight. Mom cornered us later, glass raised, to volumes unspoken, now shouted. Ray clapped Ben's back. Treat him right, Irish. And for once, no edge, but romance's afterglow fades to reels grind. Post-honeymoon. A cabin in the Ozarks, trails hiked hand in hand. Ben's Chicago offer resurfaced, deadline pressing. We argued under quilts, voices hushed to spare sleeping guests. Eldridge is us now, I pleaded. Haven, Mom, the life. And if it chokes us? He countered, eyes stormy. I need you whole, Alex, not frayed by fights. Stalemate lingered, a cloud over the bloom. Betrayal's echo surfaced subtle. A donor withdrew, citing instability after the suit. Funds dipped, Lila's fellowship lapsed. Marcus packed crates, Boston calling. Not leavin' forever, he promised, but voids gaped. Mom sensed over quilting bees, her stitches now framing Haven photos. Fight for it, she advised. Like Tom did me, through the silences. Climax for us crested in May, full moon silvering the fields. Ben packed a bag, space to think, driving to Lawrence for a conference that stretched days. Alone, I wandered the creek, Dad's watch-ticking accusations. Mom found me there, thermos in hand. He'll return, she said, sitting close. Love don't quit easy. Her story then, courting Dad post-Danny's death. How grief walled her till his patience chipped through. You too? You're the miracle I prayed wrong for. Ben returned at dawn, truck idling, face drawn. Turned it down, he confessed, collapsing into me. Can't build without foundation, you hear? Tears mingled, relief flooding. We recommitted, Haven's next phase. Family programs, adoption support. Mom volunteered her quilts for foster kids. Summer hummed content, fireflies scripting light in dusk. Theo's album launch, tracks born in the loft, drew crowds. Ray on washboard percussion, grinning sheepish. Mom danced with Lila, steps light. Ben and I watched from the porch, his hand on my swelling hope. Talks of surrogacy, a child in our arms. Our volume, he whispered. Yet humanism's arc bends gentle. One August eve, storm clouds massed, lightning forking the horizon. Mom clutched her chest mid-supper, face ashen. Hospital dash, diagnosis, angina, stress-fueled. Foolish, she rasped, for dripping. Pushed too hard. Ben stayed nights, me days, Ray hauling meals. Recovery slow, but revelations flowed. Letters to Danny she'd hoarded. Apologies penned fresh. For the son I named wrong, she read to me, voice quaver. Alex. Accepted. Adored. Discharge brought her home, to the homestead, room aired for her. Stay, I urged. She did, quilt frame by the window, overlooking the haven she'd helped hatch. Autumn's palette deepened, leaves carpeting the paths like confetti from confessional skies. Mom's presence wove seamless into the homestead's rhythm. Mornings in the garden, coaxing tomatoes from reluctant soil. Afternoons quilting with Lila, who now mentored a new cohort of young trans writers, their words fierce as thistles. Ben expanded the workshops, partnering with Topeka clinics for queer youth retreats. Teens arriving tentative, departing with shoulders squared, backpacks stuffed with zines and hope. You're changing the map, he'd tell me. Over dinner's candle flicker, his fork pausing mid-bite. I'd squeeze his foot under the table, gratitude a quiet current. Ray's transformation solidified, no longer penance but partnership. He crewed the Haven's volunteer builds. Accessibility ramp for the barn, solar panels crowning the roof in defiant gleam. Tom to prove, he'd grunt, wiping sweat. But his eyes held warmth, the grudge's husk shed like old skin. One harvest supper, he raised a jar of moonshine, clear as creek water. To Alex, the cousin who called me back. Laughter rippled, genuine. The table groaning under Mom's roast and Ben's cornbread. Strangers turned kin. Yet emotions tide ebbs revealing rocks. Mom's health wobbled. Nights of chest twinges. Doctor visits stacking like cordwood. Just age, she'd dismiss, but worry etched us. Ben and I navigated it gentle, installing grab bars disguised as rustic accents, stocking the pantry with her favorites. Sardines on saltines, chamomile for fretful sleep. Our own dreams stirred too. Surrogacy consults via Zoom, a match emerging. A teacher from Wichita, kind-eyed and certain. A family, Ben breathed, ultrasound grainy on screen, tiny heartbeat fluttering like possibility. Mom, overhearing, pressed a palm to her own chest. Like Tom always wanted. Grandbabies in the dirt. Conflict's embers glowed low, but persistent. A state bill snaked through legislature. Curbs on alternative land uses. Veiled barbs at places like ours. Petitions flew, op-eds penned. I testified in Topeka, voice steady with Ben's notes clutched. Havens save lives, I argued, faces blurring in the gallery. Mom beaming front row, Ray nodding rear. Bill stalled, but vigilance lingered. A low hum. Romance deepened in the dailies. Ben's surprise picnics by the creek, wildflowers tucked in my collar. My freelance series on queer prairies. Profiles of locals long hidden, Ben editing late with red pen and kisses. Nights, we'd lie abed, his fingers mapping my ribs, whispers tracing futures. Child's first steps in the pasture, Mom's lullabies revived. You're my redemption, I'd murmur, his laugh vibrating against me. Nah, love, we're each other's. Betrayal's final ghost visited soft, in October's chill. Ray confessed over coffee, hands wringing. Wrote a letter to the rag, against the haven back when. Mailed it anonymous. The old wound twinged, but time had blunted the blade. Why tell now? He shrugged. Clean slate. For the kid comin'. Ben, overhearing, clapped his shoulder. Slate's wipe, Ray. Welcome to the mess. Mom's decline accelerated come November. Frost tracing window panes like veins. Doctors confirmed. Heart weakening, no surgery viable. Time's borrowin', she quipped, but her quilts piled high. One for the nursery, patchwork of flannels soft as prayers. We rallied. Hospice at home, her room overlooking the oak. Stories flowed unchecked. Danny's escapades. Tom's proposals under that same tree. My boyhood mischief sweetened in retrospect. You were always the light, Alex, she admitted one dusk, hand frail in mine. Feared it'd dim you, but you burned brighter. Ben coordinated care, his empathy a shield. Ray felled chords for the hearth, ensuring warmth. Lila read poetry bedside, verses of becoming. Theo played soft, strings a serenade to letting go. Climax came quiet, a December eve blanketed white. Snow sifted gentle as she gathered us. Me, Ben, Ray, residents clustered porchside. Evelyn Hayes, she announced, voice thready but queenly, done runnin' from storms. Then to me, son, love you, always. The words, long withheld, landed like grace. She slipped away at midnight, breath easing into eternity. The watch on her nightstand stilled at 11:57. Tom's birth minute. Funeral echoed Dad's. Church packed, hymns heartfelt. Pastor spoke of prodigal returns, not judgment. Eulogy mine. She called me the son she couldn't accept, till love's will spoke volumes. Mom, you heard it last. Graveside, under the oak, we lowered her beside Dad. Quilts draped the mound. Ben held me as shovels turned, his whisper. She made it, love. You all did. Winter held us close after grief a cocoon. The baby arrived spring. Elias Thomas Riley Hayes, red-faced and roaring, tiny fists gale-strong. Mom's quilt swaddled him, lavender scent lingering. Haven thrived, expanded. A Danny wing for youth, garden named Evelyn's Echo. Ray uncled awkward but adoring, bouncing Eli on knee. Ben and I parented tandem. Diapers at dawn, stories at dusk, the land our lullaby. Years folded, Eli's first words, Gamma, for the photos of Mom grinning. Haven's 10th anniversary, fiddles under stars, Ray toasting volumes eternal. Betrayals? Faded footnotes, conflicts compost for growth. Romance endured, Ben's hand in mine across supper tables. Our love the truest inheritance. One sunset, Eli on shoulders, we walked the creek. Grandpa Tom's storm? He asked, pointing clouds. I smiled, Ben's arm linking mine. Nah, buddy. Ours, the kind that clears to rainbows. And in that golden hush, Dad's will echoed still. Not land alone, but legacy. Love, loud and unyielding. Humanism's close. No tidy bows, but threads woven strong. In Eldridge's heart, we built not despite the gales, but through them, accepted at last.